I promised myself when I reached around 100 subscribers, and by the way, thank you, my friends, but I'd treat myself to doing a video that is all me, baby, so I could really wallow around in the nerd stuff that gets my juices flowing. So I'm going to talk about my two favorite topics in the entire universe, the brain and sexy times, which go together like chocolate and peanut butter. Just a reminder, I'm not an expert and I'm not speaking as a professional here, but I will link a few things in the low bar if you want to check up on where I'm getting my reasoning from. I'm something of a primitive, tooth and claw biological determinist. My worldview is heavily filtered through this lens, as I've not encountered a social issue yet that is not significantly affected by the objective nature of the human central nervous system, which of course develops out of the mix of genetics, epigenetics, environment, homeostatic function. This would seem fairly straightforward, I would think. You know, brain to body to action to society. But I've encountered a curious resistance to this lately in my YouTube meanderings. Teal Deer and Stardust had a great discussion on this idea I'll link to in the low bar. Now, before anyone thinks I'm going full Harris, I do believe in free will and choice. Sort of. It's just like the software is by definition constrained by the hardware's limitations. You can upgrade the hardware, the brain meats, to a certain degree. Neuroplasticity, adaptability, mental exercise, pharmaceuticals, hormone therapy, even diet. These things can change and even improve the way those little gray cells function and all the other chemical cascades that come out of that. However, do you know what a really resistant aspect of the brain to alteration is? Yup, the reptile brain. These are the parts exceedingly devoted to keeping you alive beyond the autonomic systems. And despite the fact that reproduction is the only non-essential function of human physiology, dedicate a lot of resources to the mechanisms of sexy times. In phys-biz terms, the brain is sort of divided into forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. I'm using reptile brain and not hindbrain on purpose because in the strictest sense, the hindbrain, specifically the pons and part of the medulla, is only a tiny part of sexual arousal. No, I'm referring to the second level up. The first job of the brain is to keep your heart beating and remind you to breathe and how to stand up. The second level is things like staying warm, avoiding danger, eating, sleeping, and fucking. This is where the hindbrain smucks into the midbrain and then out into daddy thalamus and mommy hypothalamus. And then, of course, the entire limbic system gets engaged and everything goes to shit. Oh, and then the frontal lobe has to step in and tell everybody to calm the fuck down. Goddamn limbic system ruins everything. But anyway, so there are parts of our brain that are actively promoting these animal urges in our areas, to a greater or lesser extent dependent on the endocrine system, among other things. The process of somatosensory reception and the effect it has in your brain is pretty much immediate. There are a whole bunch of other parts of the brain that can step in to slow the choo-choo down, what we call inhibitors, but like it or not, if you're in the majority of the population who do not have a traumatic brain injury, a sexual pathology, or drug interference, you're riding the sucky-fucky train whether you want to or not. And newsflash, sexual arousal is different in aggregate between men and women. Who knew? I know this might be shocking to some, but male sexual arousal is concentrated in the preoptic nucleus of the hypothalamus, while female sexual arousal is in the ventromedial. This is a fancy way of saying male and female sex brains are different, which every consumer of porn already knows. Duh. Women have more activity in their amygdala, that's the angel devil part of your brain, basically, during the inhibitory anticipatory phase, while in men, the amygdala has a larger positive effect in arousal itself and orgasm. Imaging has been pretty consistent, supporting the idea that some parts of the brain of both men and women, conspicuously the ones related to impulse control, morality, and good decision-making, just go dark when you hit the big O. Yep, your brain considers all orgasms good orgasms, kind of like pizza. And specific to what I'm going to talk about a bit later, the amygdala light-up cascade in women can cause some serious issues when it comes to how close its response is to both sex and fear. and that amygdala activity in women is associated both with a higher prevalence of response to negative stimuli and long-term memory consolidation. In fact, the female amygdala might be one of the factors in what is now called rape culture, but more on that in a bit. And just checking, everyone already knows that while the higher parts of the brain can definitely influence arousal and consummation, they aren't necessary in the strictest sense, right? I mean, how do people think semen samples in lab rats are procured? We put on Barry White, pour a nice Zinfandel, and pop Ratatouille on the big screen? No, it's electrodes in the arse, which I hear has also become very popular in Montreal these days. I'm going to swerve a little bit out of my lane here, as evolutionary psychology isn't my field. But I think there's a lot of merit in looking at how our brains work as a gestalt and trying to figure out how and why we do what we do. So what do we know about female brains? 1. They have a comparatively increased response to fear and safety issues. 2. They have a comparatively increased response to storing traumatic events long term. Females have what we call a lower habituation threshold than men in general, which is a Ponzi way of saying women can't let shit go. 3. They have a comparatively decreased response to positive visual sexual stimuli even when they report full arousal. So if you consider that in females as an aggregate, the amygdala serves as a kind of gatekeeper for sex yes, sex no, it's active in its medial area during most female orgasms, but is also geared toward negative memories, you see where this is going, don't you? Yup. Women want to bang dangerous assholes. Important point here. I do not conflate dangerous with abusive, even though it seems to have gotten blurry in the current culture. It's entirely possible for a man to be dangerous, to inspire both fear and respect, without being an abuser. In fact, abusers of women specifically have been almost universally reviled by their male peers, because it was seen as a weakness to prey on the fairer sex in what I'd call the grand gynocentric tapestry of Western civilization as we know it. Well, neurobiology of gynocentrism. Another day, maybe. I want more people to see my videos before I get hate mail. But anyway, dangerous, as I'm using it, has more to do with power, and there are many different ways to signal power. That was a whole lot of me talking to tell you something you already know, eh? But yeah, the bad boy, the dangerous vampire, 50 Shades of Grey, basically every romance novel ever written. Horrific serial killers like Ted Bundy get love letters sent to them in jail by adoring female fans. There's a psychological term for this, hybristophilia, but Dr. Leon Seltzer has written about this in depth, specifically from the perspective of why women are more likely to do this. I'll link a couple of choice articles in the low bar. There is a part of our brains, at least most of us, and I'm speaking as a female, that looks at these hyper-masculine villains and makes kind of a small kitten noise, like meow. Again, everybody already knows this. Even fucking Bernie Sanders wrote about how women have rape fantasies. Fetish sites are full of women trying to scratch this brain itch in the most safe and reasonable way possible. More proof? Watch Stefan Molyneux's recent interview with a male stripper. I'll link it. The ultra-masculine bad boy fantasy flicks the pussy sign to vacancy every time. Now, in higher order creatures such as humans, we have a whole lot of stop signs in place we've developed in order to mitigate our baser natures. We are animals, but we don't have to be animals about it. We can choose to reflect, to know ourselves, identify our impulses, and take a step back and a deep breath, and perhaps punch ourselves in the crotch. And if we can't do that, we can make external rules and laws and commandments to tell us how to behave, or else we'll be jailed, killed, or burn eternally in a lake of fire. But it doesn't change the mew, only the volume of it. No matter how much you insist you don't think this way, I bet you swooned at least a little over Loki, and might even furiously fap to Game of Thrones. But why? Why would this have developed this way? Why are sex and fear tied so closely in the female brain? Paging Dr. Sad. Paging Dr. Gad Sad. No? All right, I'll have a crack at it. Because dangerous men get shit done. And women need men to get shit done for them. Because when you wind back to the primitive tooth and claw history we somehow managed to survive through, it was not the women who had to kill and die. It was the men. Ever look into the origin of the term decimation? Females need not apply. And this killing and dying stuff being the man's burden is still largely the man's burden. Except now, the evolutionary strengths that got us the glorious civilization we have now, the orchard we've inherited that men have risked and killed and died for, are now considered in the realm of toxic masculinity. It's like, hey, thanks men for everything you've built and done and suffered for us as a group. Now either hand me your balls or fuck off. Feminism has fucked it all up for everyone. I so desperately want to say, but not all feminism, because as you already know, I'm a massive Christina Hoff Sommers and Camille Paglia fan. But I've got to shit or get off the pot on this one. No weasel words. Feminism has fucked it all up. Listen. Listen to the cry of where are all the men? I'm used to hearing this from my perpetually sexually frustrated single female peers, especially the ones around my age who are just now realizing their looks aren't going to last. Suckers. But now I'm hearing it in response to Islamist attacks like Cologne. Where are all the men? Where are all the men? Where are the dicks Gotham needs? Well, when you give them the choice of either handing over their balls or fucking off, a lot of them are going to fuck off. Especially the dangerous ones, the powerful ones. The ones who you think about at night cultivating your carpal tunnel syndrome surrounded by cats and menstrual blood paintings. The ones women need. Yeah, those ones. Slow clap, ladies. Slow fucking clap.